Story Corner, presented by Jennifer. Spirit Animals. Wildborn. Chapter 3. Jim. Maylin sat on a cushion before her looking glass, meticulously applying facial paint. She didn't mind letting her handmaidens prepare her for festivals or banquets, but today was important. Today she wanted to look just right. And when you wanted something done right, you did it yourself. After finishing the accents around her eyes, Maylin inspected her handiwork. It was a work of art on top of a work of art. People always remarked she was stunning. She had never needed paint on her face to earn compliments. But now she possessed an allure beyond her natural beauty. Anybody could get the pale base and striking lips right. But Maylin knew a few tricks her handmaidens didn't. How to properly blend the blush in her cheeks. How to use gold flecks near her eyes. And how a hint of imperfection made her hair more appealing. Maylin practiced a shy smile, then a delighted smile, followed by a look of surprise, and finally a scowl. Smoothing her hands over her snug silk robes, Maylin silently proclaimed her work complete. There came a hesitant tap on the door. "Mistress," called a high voice sweetly, "is everything all right? Can I offer any help?" This was Karish's polite way of informing her that the bonding day celebration was at a standstill. The most important people in the province were waiting on her. "I'm almost ready," Maylin answered. "I'll be out in a moment." Maylin didn't want to make everyone wait too long, but making them wait a little would ensure that all eyes were on her. The other candidates had sampled the nectar already. Maylin would drink last, in the place of honor. The conventional wisdom was that the last person to drink the nectar had the best chance of summoning a spirit animal. As the daughter of General Teng, one of the 5 high commanders of the Zonganese military, Maylin had been guaranteed the last spot at the quarterly bonding day ceremonies since birth. As his only child, her importance was elevated further. She had no brother to steal her birthright. Her mother had summoned a spirit animal, as had all 4 of Maylin's grandparents and all 8 of her great-grandparents. Her father, grandfather, and 2 of her great-grandfathers had been generals. The last of the others had been powerful merchants. Only the family of the emperor could claim a better pedigree. Her father had not called a spirit animal, but even so had risen higher in the military than any of his ancestors. He was a formidable man. No one was more cunning, or more observant, or more wrathful when crossed. Her father had told her last night that he had foreseen she would summon a spirit animal today. She didn't know whether he had visited a soothsayer or beheld the vision himself, but he had acted certain, and he was never wrong. Maylene gathered her parasol. Made of paper and intricately painted, it was strictly ornamental. She placed it over her shoulder and took a final look in the mirror. A heavy fist pounded on the door, startling her. This was no handmaiden. "Yes," Maylene called. "Are you decent?" a male voice inquired. "Yes." The door opened. It was General Chen, her father's closest aide, wearing his most formal uniform. How late was she? "What is it, General?" "My apologies for the intrusion," he said. He paused, licking his lips. He seemed perturbed, almost unsure to continue. "I have unfortunate news. The invasion of Zong has begun. We must hurry with the ceremony and then move out." "Invasion?" "Surely you know about the skirmishes in the southwest." "Of course." Her father kept few secrets from her, but he had shared no suspicions of a serious threat. "We just received word that they were but a prelude to a major incursion. Your father had prepared for something of the sort, but our enemies have more men and resources than even General Tang guessed." General Chin swallowed. "The city of Shiralawao has fallen. We are officially at war." Maylene couldn't speak. She could hardly believe that General Chin was speaking the truth. Shiralawao was one of the largest cities beyond the wall, an important Zonganese port. Was this how wars started, on days that should have been happy? She suddenly felt ill and wished she could be alone. Her father would be leaving soon. Zong was powerful, and Erida had no better general. He should be fine. But her father had described the uncertainties of war. A stray arrow could slay the mightiest hero. In wartime, none were truly safe. "The entire city has fallen?" Maylene had to ask. "Yes, reports are still coming in. The attack was lightning quick, an alliance of Zonganese rebels and foreign invaders." "I'll skip the ceremony," Maylene said. "I can do it later." "No, the news just arrived. The public doesn't know yet. We want to keep it that way for now. Don't mention the attack. All must appear calm and normal." Maylene nodded. "Fine, I'll do my part. But it's an emergency. Father can go." "He insists you drink the nectar before he leaves." Maylene followed General Chen out of her home. She ignored the questions of her handmaidens, who fell into step behind them. Their mansion adjoined the parade grounds, so it was not a long walk to the ceremony. Opening her parasol, Maylene strolled down the central aisle towards the stage. Thousands of people craned to see her. General Chen stood at her side, medals gleaming. People cheered. It seemed like an ordinary festive occasion. These people had no clue what news was coming. Near the stage, the bystanders were seated. More money and status meant more convenience and comfort. As Maylene approached, even the dignitaries and merchants and government officials arose and applauded. Maylene forced the most natural smile she could manage. She gave small nods to faces she recognized. Everything felt brittle and fake. She wondered if the onlookers could see her facade. A boy at one side of the aisle yelled her name. It was Yin, from her school. His father was a provincial officer. He had made no secret of his affection for her, even though he was almost 3 years older. She gave him a shy smile. His face turned red, and he grinned from ear to ear. Maylene had never kissed a boy, although plenty had shown interest. She hated feeling like a trophy. Not only was her father rich, not only was he a popular general, but she was also attractive and refined. None of the boys actually knew her. She was just a prize, and there was no way to tell which aspect of the prize they wanted most. She wondered how they would react if they knew her secret. Underneath the facial paint, beneath the expensive silks, she was not the dainty flower they imagined. She knew her manners, she could paint, she could serve tea, she could garden, she could recite poetry, she could sing. But her favorite pastime was hand-to-hand combat. It had started innocently at age 5. Her father was a general and a practical man. He had access to the best warriors in Zong, and he wanted his daughter to learn the basics of defending herself. He had no idea how intuitive she would demonstrate, nor how much she would enjoy it. The training had gotten more serious each year, all in secret. She became the son her father never had. She could fight with knives, staves, and spears. She could use longbows, crossbows, and slings. But her favorite discipline involved combat using her hands and feet. A scant 6 weeks past her 11th birthday, she could outmaneuver all but the mightiest masters. She was slender, but strong. After she reached her adult size, she would be very formidable. Malin hoped her spirit animal would augment her fighting skills. She knew that all sorts of power could be derived from a strong relationship with a spirit animal. With the help of the right beast, good warriors became great, and great warriors became legends. What species would benefit her the most? Her father called her the tiny tiger. A tiger would be nice, or maybe a snow leopard. An ox could grant great strength. She tried not to set her heart on something too specific. The crowd watched her enthusiastically. Only the top officers among them knew that war was coming. Soon they would all have much more than nectar ceremonies to demand their attention. When she reached the stage, Maylene folded her parasol and passed it to a handmaiden. She saw her father in the front of the crowd, dashing in his uniform, and gave a polite nod. She saw approval in his eyes. He was admiring her poise. Many caged beasts were positioned on and around the stage. A royal menagerie including orangutans, tigers, pandas, foxes, alligators, cranes, baboons, pythons, ostriches, oxen, water buffalo, and even a pair of young elephants. Their provenance usually furnished a broad assortment, but this bonding day boasted the most variety she had seen. Her father had made sure of it. On the stage awaited Sheyu, the leader of the local greencoats. He was dressed simply, and since his clouded leopard was not in sight, it was probably in its passive state. If she recalled correctly, he wore the tattoo on his chest. Her father had mixed feelings about the greencloaks. He respected them, but thought they had too much power and too many foreign ties. He didn't like their monopoly on the nectar and how they used it to remain involved in everyone's affairs around the world. Maylene was privately impressed by them. Her reasons were simple. The armies of Zong did not invite women into their ranks, but the green cloaks didn't fuss about such things. They measured people by their abilities. Maylene noticed a stranger on the stage. She had a foreign air about her, but in both her dress and her features. Her feet were bare, she was short and thin, with that fragile look of some men prefer. The feathers in her hair gave her away as a Mayan. An exotic multicolored bird stood on stage beside her. Sheyu beckoned Maylin. She went to him, remembering to face the crowd. It always looked amateurish when the candidates turned their back on the audience. In a strident voice, he proclaimed the ceremonial words, the same words he always said. Maylene told herself that if her father was wrong and no spirit animal appeared, she would keep composed. Her father made his way in the world without one. She could as well. Sheyu held a jade decanter to her lips. Maylene took a sip. The warm fluid was a bitter shock to her tongue. It took some effort to avoid gagging. Instead, she forced herself to smile as she swallowed. For an unsteady moment, Maylene was afraid she would choke on the taste. Then a fiery heat filled her belly. As the warm radiance radiated outward, her ears started ringing. The sky was clear, but the sun dimmed. There was a brilliant flash, and she was joined on stage by a black and white panda. It was large for the species, with disturbingly silver eyes, just like Jin on the Great Seal of Zong. The panda trundled over to Mei Lin and reared up to place its paws against her ribs. The fiery heat instantly drained away. For a moment, Mei Lin felt profoundly relaxed. She was no longer playing a role in front of a crowd. She was simply herself. She basked in the warmth of the sun and rejoiced in the gentle current of the air around her. Then the moment slipped away. Mei Lin stared at her new spirit animal in bewilderment. A giant panda? Nobody called giant pandas, because Jin had been a giant panda, and Jin was a great beast, one of the fallen. The large statue of Jin stood in the far corner of the parade grounds, huge and somewhat ridiculous. A panda was basically the opposite of a tiger. More silly and cute than impressive or threatening. What skill would it bestow on a fighter? The ability to eat bamboo? The audience made no sound. Mei Lin found her father's eyes. He looked shocked. The Mayan woman came to her side. I am Lenora, she said quietly. I am here to help you. Are you a green cloak? I am not wearing it, but yes. Do you realize what you've done? I'm not supposed to be able to summon a panda. Exactly. Lenora took her hand and raised it high. Mei Lin has fulfilled the prophecy that most have forgotten. Jin the Fallen has returned to Erida. Let us all... Lenora never finished her sentence, because the alarm bell started ringing and a gong clamored, reserved for emergencies. Mei Lin scanned the parade grounds alert. Was this connected to the invasion? That made no sense. Sarah was far away, beyond the wall of Zong. Just as Mei Lin remembered to guard her expression, the great horns on the city wall sounded 3 times. Long, low notes that warned of immediate danger. The audience began to stir and exclaim. Or that many eyes remained on her, Mei Lin held very still, trying to appear undisturbed. This was no practice exercise. The horn confirmed that. Something was horribly wrong. Did she smell smoke? It was hard to see much beyond the high walls of the parade grounds. Then the screaming began. Towards the rear of the parade grounds, beyond the carefully monitored seats of the dignitaries, fighting broke out. Men and women flung off cloaks, many summoning spirit animals. Swords and axes began to cut down bystanders. As people pressed to get away, a bull charged through the crowd. A trio of arrows curved through the air to thunk down on the stage. Mei Lin ignored the arrows, even though one landed close enough to kick it. The invasion was supposed to be far away, beyond the wall. She had heard of riots in some of the outlying towns before, but nothing like that had ever happened in Jian'ou Ryan. It was a model city, one of the mightiest in all of Zong. With a flash, Shiryu released his spirit animal. The clouded leopard gave a savage cry. Shiryu pulled on a glove fitted with 4 sharp blades. On his other hand, he seized Mei Lin by the upper arm, giving a yank to start her moving. They must have come for you, he yelled. As she stumbled after him towards the rear of the stage, Mei Lin craned to see the parade grounds. Guards were engaging the rebels. Spears met sword, axes met shields. Some weapons found their mark. Men and women screamed. Mei Lin knew much about battle through her father, but until now she had never seen anyone killed. In a few brief seconds, she saw death, and more of it than she could handle. Her last glimpse before she jumped off the stage beside Shira was of Kesha, her chief handmaiden, falling to her knees with an arrow buried in her back. Mei Lin's father was there, to steady her. General Qin waited at his side, along with Lenora. Hurry, her father urged. We must get to the tower. We need to survey the city. The words roused her. Right, she said, glancing back just in time to see her panda jump gracefully from the stage. At least Jin appeared unharmed. Would Kishira die from that arrow? It had looked bad. Her father ran towards the door behind the stage. Mei Lin followed, with Shiryu nearby. From one side, several armed rebels raced to block their retreat. A large dog ran with them, and a red panda, and an ibex with tall back-swept horns. Generals Teg and Chen drew their swords at the same time. Veering away from the door, they met the rebels violently. Pulling on a second clawed glove, Shiryu rushed to join them. Meilin wanted to help, but she was unarmed, and the enemies had weapons. She looked around frantically for a weapon, but found none. General Chen and her father engaged the enemy with the same poise they used on the practice floor. They worked in tandem, deflecting attacks, dispatching foes, and pivoting to lend each other assistance. Shiryu and his clouded leopard ducked and weaved among the rebels, narrowly dodging attacks and effectively slashing opponents. Lenora dragged Meilin to the door. Jin stayed near her. As a second group of rebels approached, Shaya and the generals fell back. With blood flowing freely from his shoulder, General Chen opened the door with the key. "Hurry!" he cried. The group streamed through, and General Chen locked the door behind them. Meilin's father took off running, leading them along the hallway within the parade ground walls. Meilin stayed right behind him. The thick walls muffled the tumult from the parade ground, so their footfalls echoed loudly. Glancing over her shoulder, Meilin saw Lenora's bird hopping and fluttering along. The panda brought up the rear, hurrying just enough to stay close. Meilin could tell where her father was heading. The lookout station at the corner of the parade ground offered one of the highest vantage points of Jin Ryan. They would be able to see most of the city and much beyond. It was the quickest way for him to assess the situation. As they raced along the hallway, Meilin resisted asking questions. Had they been alone, it would have been different. But in mixed company, her father would volunteer information as he desired. The soldiers at the base of the lookout tower straightened and saluted her father as her father drew near. He gave a quick salute back, then climbed into the lifter. "What is this?" Lenora asked hastily. "An ingenious device," Shiryu explained. "Counterweights will raise the platform to the top of the tower." They all stepped onto the platform. The panda showed no hesitation. Meilin stared into those silver eyes as the lifter rose briskly. Despite the chaos around them, the panda appeared serene and disturbingly knowing. Meilin looked away first. When the lifter reached the top, Meilin's father hustled them onto the observation terrace. Soldiers with telescopes paused to salute. "Carry on," her father said. The ranking officer approached, but her father waved him away, preferring to use his own fabrications to assess the situation. Meilin stood beside him, eyes wide, hardly believing what she was seeing. Jin Ryan was under attack. The capital of the province and one of the largest cities in Zhang had battles raging within and without. A huge host of charged the city walls, rushing across the plains like a flood. Rebels swept through clusters of defense, trying to organize themselves. Many ran alongside animals. Others rode animals. They carried swords and spears, maces and axes. Where had they come from? Why had there been no warning? The city was burning, black smoke billowing up from at least a dozen locations that Meilin could see. The old academy where she attended classes was aflame. That ancient building had stood for centuries. Her ancestors had studied there, and now Meilin watched it fall. Fierce skirmishes came in and out of view down on the streets. Meilin craned to see, but buildings and trees blocked much of the action. Meilin's heart squeezed as she glanced up at her father's stoic face. She could tell he was shocked, but he hid it well. Those who did not know him immediately might not recognize how deeply he was stunned. He held out a hand for a telescope. Raising it to one eye, he focused on a few areas beyond the city wall and then a few within. "So many have spirit animals," he murmured. General Chen had his own spyglass. "Unprecedented. There hasn't been an army like this since the Devourer," her father finished. Meilin blinked. The Devourer was a legend from the past, a monster in nursery stories. Why would her father mention him at a time like this? "Where did they all come from?" Shay asked. "How could that army have gotten past the wall of Zong without a single guard noticing?" Meilin looked to her father. She wanted to pose the same question. They wear no uniforms, he said. They didn't win through force. They must have trickled in. Perhaps over years. Many look Zonganese, but not all. It staggers me to consider the logistic involvements. I would have named an attack on this scale impossible, yet here they are. The strength of Zong is concentrated far from here, along our outer wall. Many soldiers now travel toward Shir Lao, but that was evidently a diversion. What must we do? General Chen asked. We will do our duty, General Tang said. He raised his voice. Leave us. The other soldiers abandoned the observation terrace. Yu took Lenore by the arm and turned to go. Not you, green cloaks, General Tang said, his voice a quiet growl. He kept a hand on Maylin's shoulders, so she knew he wanted her there as well. Yu and Lenore drew close. Maylin watched her father. His expression made her uncomfortable. She tried to suppress the fear gnawing inside. Jalal Ryan will fall, he said plainly. We don't have enough defenders here to resist. Lenore, you claim that Maylin has summoned Jin herself, the living symbol of Zong? What does it all mean? What do you propose? I wish to bring her to our commander, Lenore said. Jin is not the first of the fallen to return in recent weeks. This war is coming to all of Eridas. We mean to reunite the four fallen and fight. It is our only chance. Maylin felt the hand on her shoulder tightening. Her father gave a single nod. So be it. Lenore, take my daughter. This is no place for her at present. Shiryu, please see that they embark safely from the port of Shin-Kei-Dai. Shiryu placed a fist on his chest and inclined his head. It would be my honor. Father, I don't want to go, Maylin cried. Please, let me stay with you. Please let me defend our home. It is not safe for you. Where would I be safer than with the greatest general in all of Eridas? And, he continued, holding up a hand to stay her, you may have vital duties elsewhere. He crouched to look her straight in the eye. Maylin, visit with this green cloak commander. Hear him out. If he talks sense and the path feels true, lend the aid that duty requires. If not, seek a better path. In either instance, do not forget who you are, or where you came from. But, General Tang shook his head. This is my will. Maylin knew that the conversation was over. Her fate had been decided. Hot tears stung her eyes. She looked out at the army charging towards her home, then down at the ravaged traders already at work on the parade grounds. How could she run away, leaving her father to face this threat, his army divided and already half defeated? She glanced over at Jin. The panda returned her gaze with understanding and perhaps a hint of pity. Was she imagining empathy in those penetrating eyes? Maylin stared at the ground. She didn't need understanding. She needed strength. Not only did the panda have little chance of improving her combat skills, it was also the reason the green cloaks were taking her away. Away from her home, away from her father. A clamor arose from the stairwell. An injured soldier staggered up to the top of the stairs. They're coming. There's too many. Maylin's father gave a nod. Hold them as long as you can. The soldier turned and hobbled back down the stairs. Unseen weapons clashed. Animals screamed. Moving to the top of the stairs, General Chen drew his sword. Maylin's father pulled the levers that lowered the lifter, then gestured to a ladder that descended the interior of the shaft. Climb down to the first access tunnel. It should allow you to slip by the rebels. Get out of the city. Maylin couldn't hold back her words. What about... Her father sliced his hand through the air and silenced her. General Chen and I will confirm you reach the tunnel. Then we will make our escape. He gave his daughter a strained smile. I won't let this rabble take me. Go! There was no room for argument. Maylin would not shame him with any further pleas or disagreements. Maylin raised her eyes to his. As you wish, father. The others were already heading down the ladder. She was mildly astonished to find Jin capable of descending unaided. As Maylin placed her foot on the first rung, General Chen engaged his first foe. Just before her head passed down the shaft, she saw General Chen and her father backing up, swords flashing, pressed by numerous opponents. She kept silent. If the enemies noticed her descent, her father's efforts would be in vain. Maybe he would get away. He was a cunning man. With tears blurring her vision, Maylin joined the others in the cram tunnel. Taking her hand, Shay led the way.